As I said in our Getting Started lecture, a lot of what we're going to talk about in this class is different methods for observing and assessing children. So this is our first lecture where we are going to do that. So today we're going to be talking about the methods and assessment tools of class list logs and reflective journals. So let's start first with class list logs. So a class list log, for one being a tongue twister, but also it is basically just taking the list of children who are in your class. So you might have an attendance sheet, you might have some sort of other record that has the names of all of the children in the classroom, and you're just going to take that list and then write notes next to each child's name for a particular thing you might be interested in observing. So you can see here on the what is it, it says it's a method or format to record one or more short, important to know pieces of information about each child present on that day. So let's say that you are interested in how children do during the transition from lunch to nap time, and you just want to jot a little note about how each child in the class seems to navigate that particular daily transition. Now, it's obviously not necessary to write down information for children who aren't in attendance that day, so even though you may have a list of all of the children who are enrolled in your class, you're only going to be writing down information for the children that you see. And that's because you're not writing down information for each child based on what you've seen them do in the past or what you think they can do. You are writing down information in real time as it's happening. So while children are transitioning from lunch to nap, you are jotting a little note for each one of the children who is there that day for how they're actually doing during that moment in time. So it is recording what you see happening in the day that it's happening, not a memory of a past event, not a projection of what you think the child might do in the future. In a minute, I'm also going to show you all the different kinds of things that you can jot down class list log notes about. But for this slide, just suffice it to say that it's a great tool to be able to write down information about all different kinds of events that happen in the class and how children are navigating those events or what different kinds of skills they're showing in particular developmental areas and domains. So the main purpose of a class list log is to have like a quick recording sheet where you can see how children are doing in a particular thing. So again, maybe how they're doing in transitioning from lunch to nap, or is everybody able to count to 10? And then you can use that kind of quick information about each child to think about how you can adjust your instruction, your interactions, the activities that you provide. So this is going to be a big theme throughout this class, is that we are collecting information to help children grow and develop and learn. And the best way that we can help children grow and develop and learn is to engage in something called intentional teaching. So if I'm being intentional about something, I'm being thoughtful and planful and careful. So if I'm teaching young children, I want to make sure that I have ample information about where they're at developmentally and how they're doing with particular skills and abilities, so that I can then adjust what I'm doing to be a better match to facilitate that child's growth and development. So that's intentional teaching, not just doing things randomly or kind of on the fly without data or information, but collecting ample information, reflecting on that information, using that information to create better policies, procedures, activities, interactions, relationships with the children, etc. So this is an example from your text of a class list log. So you can see that this particular class list log has 5 children in attendance on the 10th of September, and we are interested in looking at how children are doing arriving to school on the first day. So how does that first drop off at preschool go? So we can see that Amy kissed Mom goodbye, that she ate and she napped, that Carter brought by his grandma, he pushed her out the door, he ate but he didn't nap. Patty gave a quiet goodbye to Mom, played alone, ate, napped, can't remember. So, this is part of the challenge of a class list log is you are in the classroom. Chances are, if you're doing this kind of observation in particular, you are a participant observer. So you're also navigating all the children at the same time that you're trying to make observations. So you do the best that you can with the notes that you're jotting down, but it's difficult because you're also navigating the children in real time and it's hard to make those kinds of notes. So you can see that it's not maybe as exact as other forms of observation that we'll talk about later, but you do your best to be as exact as you can. You can also see that there's no subjective pieces in here, so it's not like quiet goodbye to Mom, maybe she doesn't like her mom. We're not inserting that, we're just saying what happened. Watched father from the window. That's not saying that, the child was very sad and was missing the dad and wondered where he went. We don't know any of these things. We just know that the child watched their father from the window. So you do want to be as objective as you can, as detailed as you can, as factual as you can, given the limitations of being a participant observer as things are happening. So you can see that we're going to be short and specific. We're going to have the same kind of theme for each of the children. So we're talking about arrivals and the first day for all children. We're not talking about arrivals and first day for one child and then writing down notes about bathrooming for another. So we want to make sure that we're being consistent about what kind of information we're noting for each child as much as we can. It's an alphabetical list that helps you to be able to find children's names more quickly when you're taking a peek at each one. It is okay to add some notes to yourself, like, that kid didn't seem to show today. Did they move? Let me remind myself to make a phone call later to follow up on that. Not subjective notes, not what you think about the child or their family or their behavior, but notes of things that you'd like to remember to do or follow up on. Later in today's lecture, we're going to talk about reflective journals. That's the place for your own personal notes, observations, ideas, beliefs, etc. So that's basically it. A class log list is pretty easy. You're just jotting down some basic notes to help you kind of have a sense for how children are doing in the particular thing that you've decided to focus on for the day. So this is just a brief slide to talk about how do we organize this kind of information. So, if you're walking around writing, you might want to use a tablet or a smartphone. You could put that class list log on a clipboard and carry it around that way and write in real time. You could get labels, like stickers, and write notes on stickers or post-it notes and then stick them in a child's file. You could use index cards that you stick in a child's file. You could use a date stamper instead of having to write the date. These are not things that are strict. So a lot of these observation methods that we're going to talk about, there are particular ways to use them. There are particular kinds of things you're supposed to be writing, but the managing of where you write those things and how you get them into children's files, and if you're using something electronic to record information versus paper and pencil, those are kind of all up to you. That's just basic organization that you get to make determinations about. So some people like to use Microsoft Outlook to plan their calendar, or Google, and some people like to carry an old school planner and write things down. It doesn't really matter how you get the information recorded or how you store it, but you just have to figure out for you what's going to be the best system and manageable during the day when you will likely be a participant observer and have lots of other things going on. So as I mentioned before, class list logs can be used for all kinds of information. This is not an exhaustive list. I would encourage you, after you listen to this slide, to write down some other ideas of things that you could use a class list log for. But these are some of the behaviors that might be appropriate to pay attention to, and things that you can easily write quick notes, because remember, you're not going to just be writing a note for one child. You're going to be trying to look at everybody and write a note for everybody. So sometimes simple, easy to observe behaviors that you can jot down quick notes on are the best for a class list log. So does a child make it to the toilet on time, or do they have accidents? Can they cut with scissors? Maybe you're interested in if they can cut on a line with scissors. Can they sit and listen to a story? And if so, for how long? Can they pour their own juice? Do they rest or sleep at nap time or rest time? If it's an older child, can they write their name in cursive? If it's a younger child, can they write their name in print? And is that print all uppercase? Is it a mixture of upper and lower? Are children considerate of other feelings? You probably want to dial in on that one a little bit more. What does it mean to be considerate? What are some indicators of consideration that you might want to be noting down? Can they pedal a tricycle? Do they do something that shows that they understand the concepts of front, back, up, down, loud, soft? So if given directions in those things, do they follow the direction? Do they use those words in correct ways? So you have to have something specific that you're looking for that shows you that understanding is happening, because understanding is a bit vague. Do they use words to resolve conflict rather than hitting or screaming or other kinds of things? And do they follow classroom rules, or are they struggling to follow classroom rules? So all potential things for a class list log. So once you've created a class list log, what are you going to do with it next? So this is something that should be kept in children's folders. And again, that could be a paper pencil kind of folder. So maybe you go buy like a plastic file box and you have a file folder for each child, and you place information in that you can use to look at later. Maybe you are keeping electronic files and you're collecting data electronically. That is 100% okay too. Just always make sure that any kind of file system that you have, that you keep it secure so that folks who shouldn't have access don't have access. So make sure that it's on a password protected device, or that the file box is in a locked cabinet or secure area, so that information about children doesn't get places that it should not. Confidentiality is tremendously important when we're working with humans. So make sure that it gets filed, secured, stored, so that you have access to it. You might want to take the information that you've gotten and transfer it to some kind of other sheet. So maybe you're keeping a record for each child, and you need to transfer the information that has a whole bunch of children's names on it. So this is the other trick, is you've created a class list log that has information about all the children in the class who are present on that day. So to put it in a child's personal folder, you either have to transfer it to a different form or electronic document, or you have to delete out all the names of children who are not that particular child, right? So we don't want to be putting information about other children into a children's file. So you have to think about, how am I going to manipulate that class list log so that I can have a record for each individual child that doesn't have every other child's name on it. Whenever we're collecting information, so any of the observation assessment methods that we're using, we always want to make sure that it's for the purpose of something. Like, you shouldn't just be collecting data to collect data. It should be something that you're going to use to be more intentional, to alter the strategies and practices that you're using. It could be something that you share with family members, either throughout the year or doing a family educator conference. It could be used to share with other professionals who do need to know things about the child. So you always want to think about how to format things so that if you need to share it outside of yourself, that it's in an appropriate format to do so. And that's why we always want to make sure that we're writing down things that are objective, not subjective. Imagine if you wrote, that the child is bossy or mean to other children, and then that's something that you show to families. That probably isn't a real good look, right? So better to just say the child asked another, or told another child to move out of the way. That's not me being subjective. That's me saying what happened in a particular moment, and then that gives the opportunity for the family and I to talk about what that means, or what utility that behavior has for the child, or maybe what the child could be working on that has more utility for them. So always be careful with your language. Always be objective, not subjective. So this slide is also taken from your book. So for each of the methods that we're going to talk about, your book often has kind of a recap of advantages and disadvantages that I think is important to explicitly highlight. The book is great, but I try to pull out a few things here and there that seem particularly relevant. So one nice thing about a class list log is it's quick. So you're using a list that you already have. You're picking something simple that you can write down pretty quick, easy information about. So even if you are a participant observer, you should be able to write notes pretty quickly, even in real time as you're interacting with the children. You get information on every single child, so you're not leaving a child out. It might also help you to realize that there are certain children that you're paying more attention to than others if you're able to create more detailed notes about one child and are missing information on another. So that might be a good reminder for you about a child you need to pay more or less attention to. It gives you specific, dated, brief, factual information. So if you're being objective, you're sticking to what you plan to observe about. You're going to have some nice, quick information on every child that has a date, so you know when it happened. It is a great tool to think about, is there more that I need to collect about a child? It's kind of a good base, good starting point to think about what you know about particular children and what else you might want to know. And then you can use class list logs. So let's say that you want to do, that transition between lunchtime to nap. You could do this every month or so, and you could see if children are increasing their skills in that particular transition over time, because you have information from how they've been doing along the way. So one thing that's difficult with a class list log is that you may have new children come, old children leave, so you may be having to constantly revise that list. If you're having to take that information and transfer it over to another form so that you can put it in a child's individual file, that could potentially get time consuming. Brief information is great, but it has a Achilles heel. So it's great that it's brief because it's kind of a quick way to look and see how children are doing, but brief information is brief because you don't have a lot of context, you don't know a lot of detail about things because you're purposely not writing detail. So we're going to talk about some more detailed methods as we move along in the class that might be a good partner for the class list log. Again, if you do want to use it as something that you can compare later on, you have to do it more than once. So you either have to decide, is this just going to be an in-the-moment piece of information, or is this something that I'd like to continue to know more about kind of along the way? And if it's regularly happening kinds of things, this is a good tool to use, but if it's something kind of special or unusual, it's probably not going to have the usefulness that it does if you're recording the kinds of events that happen on a more regular basis. So next up, let's talk about reflective journaling. So reflective journaling is actually not an observation/assessment method. It can be used in conjunction with the various observation and assessment methods that we're talking about in this class, but it is not an observation or assessment method itself because it is subjective. And when we're using observation assessment methods, we are going to be objective, not subjective. But it is okay to have a space to write your own subjective personal thoughts about the objective information that you collect. And that's what a reflective journal is it's a chance for you to write down sort of your feelings, your thoughts, your impressions. It's not a space to be documenting objective information about children's development, but it is a space where you can write how you're feeling about something that you've seen, what you might like to do with that information. So it is a good supplement to observation methodology in gaining information about children, but not something that should replace those methods. So here are some reasons for journaling. So journals are great because it gives you a chance to think about and closely examine and ruminate on the things that you are collecting information about through your observation methods and assessments. So it is a way to closely examine, to kind of step outside of yourself for a minute and think about what information might mean, how you can use it, think about changes that you can make, think about changes that have already happened, think about what others might think about a particular situation. It's just really for you to get a more personal, up-close view of the data that you're collecting on a regular basis. So we're going to dig in a little bit, and this is going to be your participation assignment for this particular lecture. So we're going to think about how we can use class list logs and journaling to record children's separation and adjustment on their first day of school or being dropped off at school, and how we might personally think about those behaviors that children display. So on the next two slides, it's going to give you both directions for what you're doing in your participation assignment, as well as a video that you can watch that will allow you to complete and earn those participation points. So essentially, we're going to be practicing using a class list log, and we're going to be practicing creating a reflective journal. So for this participation assignment, you need to watch the video on the next slide. I would recommend watching it all the way through and then maybe re-watching it again, because when you watch it on the first pass, you'll be able to think about which two children you'd like to focus on, and then you can go back and pick out those two children and write down details about exactly how drop-off went for them in the morning. So if we were really doing this, we would be writing down notes about every single child that's in the video, because that's the children that we can see are in the class on that particular day. But for the purposes of this practice assignment, you're not going to write down about every child. You're just going to pick two that you'd like to focus on and think about how they navigated the drop-off situation. So remember, when you're writing down a brief note about how those children did with the drop-off, make sure to be objective, not subjective. So only write down the facts of what you see, not what you think about those behaviors, because that's what you're going to do next. You're going to create a journal, and you're going to write down how those children's drop-off behaviors, what you thought about it. So how did you feel, how you might be able to help them, whatever you want to write. I'm just giving you a couple of suggestions of things that you could write, but you should be writing down whatever makes sense to you and whatever you would like to note in a more personal way about those class list log behaviors that you jotted down for each child.